Welcome to another episode of the Reinvention Show. This is the place where we come together to explore how do we not just survive the uncertainty and disruption of today's world, but actually thrive in it. And what does it mean to be successful, to be happy, to be prosperous in a world that is extremely volatile, extremely uncertain, and extremely ambiguous and complex? And today's topic is adding complexity to that discussion. And I'm so excited that we'll be talking about diversity. We will dive deep. There will be no surface discussions on diversity. But before we do, and I introduce my amazing friend and my dear guest, my amazing friend, yes, my amazing guest and my dear friend, and the other way around, my amazing friend and dear guest. Before I introduce our guest today, let me know in the comments where you're joining me from. I'm still in the US. I'm jumping on the plane tomorrow, flying to Asia for 3 weeks. So you won't see me much for a little bit. Then I'll come back at the end of June. But I have Sherry Sutton, my co-host, who will keep going with you on Thursday at 11. So make sure you show up and support her, ask her questions, get some amazing value with her guests as well. Now, let me know in the comments where you're joining me from. I'm still in Columbus, US. I see Stanislav is here from Belarus, Minsk. Welcome. Where are you joining us from around the world? Matej is here. Matej, so happy to see you. From the beautiful Slovenia, the only country in the world that has the word love in the name of the country for a good reason. And I know because I lived in that country for over 9 years. So happy to see Matej here. Let us know in the comments, what are you joining us from, where, and what are you joining us for? What brought you to the topic of diversity? And while you are typing, let me say a few words about today's guest. Of course, there is a lack of objectivity here because Ina Kukovic Borovnik is my family friend. Our kids know each other. Our husbands know each other. And I think they are born on the same day. We are close. We know each other. I've met Ina's parents. Her mom is amazing and just absolutely lovely. And I'm not objective, but if you look objectively at Ina's resume, it's hard to find a person who better fits into conversation around diversity, not only from a point of view of her professional and academic background, but also her personal journey. Educated as a lawyer, she built up her life in the field of sustainability, building and developing a nonprofit in China, going from Slovenia and living in China all of a sudden, working on sustainability long before sustainability became popular or was even a realistic conversation in the country that is well known for avoidance of issues of pollution, CO2 emissions, human rights, and many others. From there on, Ina also served in the public sector as press secretary of the prime minister of the country and moved on to do her master's of business administration, where we met. And from there was a growth of her own leadership center, Bela Voda. It's a beautiful retreat up in the mountains where we held the very first ever live meeting of the Global Reinvention Society. That was, I want to say 2017, maybe 5 years ago, I think, maybe. So that's where the birth of a lot of work in Reinvention Academy and the Reinvention movement happened, with Ina being the very first certified reinvention professional in the world. So there is hardly a better person to speak about diversity who lives diversity. And that's why it's such a joy to welcome to the show, Ina Kukovic Borovnik. Hi, Ina. Excited to have you.
Hi, Nadia. I'm so excited to be there, be here, but there in our digital space. Happy to be in this conversation.
Absolutely. So you already saw that Matej is here. Of course, your wonderful cloud cloud colleague. People really need to know what Talent Cloud is. I keep talking about this project and we're like, what? How does that
going
work?
on?
We'll ask about that because it is very much about the applied issue of diversity. How do we build diversity that is not bounded by the boundaries of our own companies, that
Mm.
is cross-boundary in terms of countries. We have Germany here. Michael is the member of the Global Alliance of Reinvention Professionals, and we have Abdumalik here. Welcome. Happy to have you. I promise a deep conversation, so we'll jump straight into it. And we just had a little chat, checking in, asking each other how's life, how the kids, what's going on. And of course, what's on our mind is a different twist on diversity that is definitely more honest and more intense way of asking the question. I am perhaps one of those people who prides herself on openness to diverse ideas, living in very diverse environments, moving from continent to continent, and respecting different languages and countries, different ethnicities and religions, different points of view. I come from a multicultural background. I am a mixed race, and my parents are mixed races. So you end up having that openness. And the events of the last half a year keep me asking the question, is there a limit to where diversity is a good thing? If we look at nature, and we are the students of biomimicry inside Reinvention Academy, when you are enrolled in the Certified Reinvention Practitioner course, the first thing you learn is the principles of biomimicry, which is a dimension of hard sciences at the intersection of biology, chemistry, and physics that studies how nature does things. How does nature solve complex problems? And of course, one of the pillars of biomimicry or nature as a whole, survival and thrival nature, is betting on diversity. A beautiful forest behind you has multiple species. It never ever goes with one species. There's no monoculture in nature. That's just humans. If you just humans do just potatoes or just wheat or just rice. Um, the functions of different animals and insects, and in nature, every living system has a function. So the fly has a function. It's actually helpful and useful for the environment. And the bee has a function, and they have different respectable functions, but not a single species performs that function in isolation or you alone. So when the massive die-off of bees happened in US, many of you heard of the US bee crisis, where at some point we lost as far as 50% of the bee population in the country. Other insects filled in the gap and started pollinating, including the common fly that we swat in our kitchens. So nature seems to bet on diversity. And then I correlated to the events of the last week, the last few months. And the two that stick out with a particular sadness right now. I'm in the US, and 2 days ago, an 18-year-old gunman, a person who bought automatic weapons legally one day after his 18th birthday, entered an elementary school and killed 19 children, age 5, 6, and 7, and 2 adults. That situation is not an isolation. We are less than 200 days into a year, but we had over 200 mass shootings in the US this year alone. So the reason this situation exists is because we have diversity of opinion. And there is a very strong disagreement on what should be the rules around guns, mental health, and on and on and on. And the reason why we don't move forward the way many other countries that experienced similar disasters moved, including Australia, New Zealand, Scotland, and so on, is because we have diversity of opinion. Similar situation is the war in Ukraine. And I was sharing with Ina how many of my relatives, not direct family, but first cousins, my direct aunts and uncles, my colleagues, partners, and friends, how many percentage-wise of them are pro-war, that believe that what Russia is doing in Ukraine is just and necessary and completely justifiable. And for me, this is heartbreaking position with which I strongly disagree, and that's diversity of point of view. So my wonder, as I'm trying to find a way forward, is there a place where diversity stops being life-giving and it starts being life-destroying? And how do we find that balance? How do we find that? What's the way forward with diversity? So maybe you have some reflections for us, as I know not only you are engaged in the field of sustainability and reinvention in business and leadership, diversity in business, but also you have been incredibly powerful in the movement with Nora Bateson around warm data and complex systems and systems thinking as a whole. So maybe some reflections, some directions around diversity that help you make sense of this world where diverse opinions end up causing quite literal destruction.
Thank you, Nadia. And as you were speaking, I was, I felt the sadness and the pain in my body, even from before we started this life. That every feeling human being feels when we talk about life being ended in a forceful way, when a system is built up in a way that's not life-giving. Yeah. So I keep on looking in this meadow that I'm next to, and all these diverse flowers and shapes of grass and soil and roots in the soil. And I think that the question should be different. I think that we tend to define terms like diversity, right? Diversity is having so many women, having so many religions, having so many people of color, having, the meadow nature doesn't say, oh, there needs to be this percentage of white flowers and green flowers and whatever purple flowers so that we will have, a healthy living system. There is no percentage of it. There's variety of it. There are multiple ways of describing this variety. And a bird sees the meadow in a different way than an ant does, or a worm in the soil does, right? So I think, or I do right now as a human being on this meadow, right? So I think, it's not about the diversity. I wouldn't say that diversity can be harmful. It can be harmful when it's defined as one thing that we believe it is, or it's a common definition of it. It's very dangerous to have definitions because they create these polarities, right? Are you for diversity or not for diversity, right? And we have many definitions like that in the air, in our societies, in our organizations, that define our language, our tone, our cultures. And we think we are diverse, but actually I think, living in a time where these polarities are getting dangerously apart. Are you for or are you not for? And all of the colors in between, all of these conversations, all of these relationships, of a worm to the soil, to the meadow, of a bee, of a bird, of me, are just kind of forgotten. Because, just tell me, are you up for this war or not? And there's everything is happening in the relationships within. It's not about the diversity, it's in the relationships between everything and everyone included. And yes, that's very complex. It's very hard to grasp, and you go like, yeah, but at the end of the day, you need to form an opinion. Well, yes, and yes, and every living being has a tendency to survive. And I believe that every human being in our essence has a tendency to create conditions for life. But in our thinking, we got so kind of, if you want, educated, out-systemed by it, that we tend to create these polarities that are very dangerous in every single conversation, or not even conversation. There's a lot of things that don't need to get said, or being verbalized, but are there. The exclusion is there. I'll be like, yeah, maybe I'll talk to you about this. Maybe you really have, arguments, or like your view or your feeling that's different, but really, I'm going to stand here and listen, but really, I don't care. Right? You get that feeling a lot. So I hope that made some sense or reflections, but for me, it's really being able to notice those relationships in every single conversation, in every single thing we do every day, that create that diversity. So it's not something we necessarily see outside, the colors, the shapes. It's how we are thinking in relationship to others, to every all living ecosystem, if you want. That creates that diversity I think you and me are trying to talk about today, and it's very hard to talk about, right? But yeah.
How do you address the need for complex system understanding and at the same time create structures and systems that do require definitions, constitution of a country, regulations and rules inside the company, rules you apply in your family for your kids? How do you see the complexity and at the same time locate it in a singular line in the sand?
I would say it's a constant traveling, being aware there's always contexts you're put in those definitions. So there's always transformations, and there's always contexts in multiple. So if I pull, there's this one constitution that I have, but in a certain day and time, there are so many circumstances in the context of economy, health, politics, art, education that matter to how I'm going to see and interpret that definition, right? So, coming from law, and this is something that intrigued me very much, actually, is this dance, of what are the possibilities. It's not black and white. That doesn't mean you interpret it to be better for you. I don't like that direction, but it's there to be interpreted in real life, in a living system. So it's not, hey, just because it's black and white, we're going to do it this way. But it demands, I would say, the capacity to acknowledge the complexity of. And I'm not standing up for all law practices all over the world for this. I just want to make a point. It's the way I see regulations or definitions to live. Yeah. And that's why, yes, I see it as a constant kind of dance, and I see it as a special capacity of ours that we forget, or we don't even use a lot of times. This tenderness to notice the differences that make a difference, as Gregory Bateson said. It's the difference that makes the difference, and if you don't see it, it's and to add to complexity, because it's such a passionate kind of, I would say, field I'm learning, and I guess I'll be learning for the rest of my life for sure. A generational effort, that I guess it's coming so much more to life, because we are not seeing that systems being built up as singular, as individual, are working in a healthy way anymore, on so many levels, in wars, in climate change, in health systems, in law, everywhere. I think we can agree that we've come to a point where the questions of our own evolution as a species are being put up, on daily basis, more than, I guess, what we know ever was. Have never been so interdependent globally on this little planet Earth that we have, that we are now. So it's, grasping that is very hard. But I say, nature and art are two kind of fields that help us make sense when it comes to complex issues or complexity, understanding a complexity.
I'm noticing some signs that maybe our connection is not the best. So I'll try this setting so it's a little bit better view for everyone and a little bit less number of pixels. And you already started answering my next question about how do you then develop the capacity to think with openness in mind, with multi-level systems in mind. How do you develop the awareness of complexity? Are there exercises? Are there practices? And you already mentioned art and nature, but maybe there are some other things that help build that awareness and create a stronger muscle when it comes to the capacity to see multiple points of views, interdependencies between them, and try to find a solution that is possible without one side destroying another. The solution that is a way forward, which is sometimes incredibly hard. There's issues around the world that do not have much of a space of compromise. Death sentence, for example. You cannot have a little bit of a death sentence. Either the country has a death sentence or it doesn't have a death sentence as a practice, as a legal permission. So there is nothing in between. It's just one or another. But to come to a place where everyone interdependent around this decision is in a space of generativity and ability to function and coexist. Are there practices that can help us to be able to find those kind of solutions where we can coexist in interdependence without killing each other?
Very hard questions, Nadia. And I don't pretend I have a step-by-step guide. I want to make an exclamation point. But I do, or I have experienced many conversations that are called the warm data labs or the people need people sessions, which means that this same structure of a conversation is built online. So that was actually built during Corona, because the warmth of the information, it very much happens when we are physically together, right, Nadia? If you and me would be sitting in this porch right now together, the conversation, the feeling of it, and things that would come out would be very different. Yeah. So these two are, you could say, processes, yeah, that support developing this, as I said, special noticing of where this warm data is, those relationships are, what are they bringing? What are those unseen possibilities, that cannot happen in a conversation between two politicians that come into a room for negotiation with a certain script and a certain language, that doesn't allow them to go outside of anything, right? There is no diversity in thinking when a setting like that, it's, what's going to happen. And exactly. So I would invite anyone listening to ask about this. Google worm data and worm data labs and people need people session. You can reach out to me. I'm happy to invite you to this community because it's an exploration of a lifetime, as I said. But essentially, what happens is you are brought together in a group of people and talk about certain questions. And questions matter a lot, Nadia, we both know. So I don't want to go into details of that. It's not so simple, but a certain line of questions in multiple contexts. Yeah. And once you go through this process, even a couple of times, people will go and ask me, okay, Ina, but what changed for you? What is it? Like, how can I? And I'm like, actually, nothing changed, but everything is different. So, not being able to be part of them for a while, there's something missing. There's a warmth and a possibility and a moisture of a soil that I miss, that allows me not to go into my scripted solution making or my scripted language for sustainability, or for climate change or for, solving a war. Yeah. And in our ways of working in systems right now, that is very, very hard. Because what are you saying to me? I'm supposed to be having a series of conversations, and then what? What's going to happen? I want to know what's the outcome of this. We are so, used to that. If it doesn't have that kind of outcome that I know before I enter something, I'm just not going to do it because I don't see the value, right? There's the script already. So that's one, and again, there's so much theory behind this that we don't have time to dig deeper. But I can say there are some principles, and one of them that kind of define, if you want, worm data, and one of them is multiple description, right? So inviting multiple descriptions to any definition, if you want, meaning what does the bee thing, what does the yellow flower thing, what does the human sitting there think? Yeah. And another principle, maybe just to add here, observing the observer, meaning it matters who's interpreting the results. It matters who ordered the analytics for the results to happen, right? So pay attention to that. Yeah, notice that. And there's many more principles, and I don't want to kind of go into everything because I think it will be too much for the listeners. But that's something that I could offer more of. And then, as I said, it's not spending time in nature for spending time in nature as we know it, but to make a different sense of things, to observe, to sit down and observe, really, not for 5 minutes, but for a year on the same spot for half an hour a day, and see what's happening and notice what's happening and maybe learn from those movements. Because it takes a lot more patience to go to the solution part, if you do or approach challenges that way.
For those of you who want to see how a world of multiple definitions work, you see the book behind us, the Chief Reinvention Officer Handbook. And of course, Ina was part of the community that co-created that book. And one of the things that we decided early on that we will provide no single definition of reinvention. I was recently speaking at a Futurist Society forum where people were so upset when I wouldn't give them a singular definition, that I kept giving one and another and another and another and another. And the verdict from the very vocal few people in that community was that I'm being very flaky, evasive, and essentially pushing trash because there's no there. There's no substance. But if you download the book, you will see one of the first thing on the very first page, and you have of course, the free 85-page download. One of the first pages you will see is the 5 definitions of reinvention, and they're very drastically different from each other. But what's happening is, if we do this round again now, I would think we are closer to a stable 10-15 definitions that we're using constantly. And I would assume in another few years, as the practice grows, we will be in an encyclopedia of reinvention, where just the same word will be defined in so many pages that it requires a separate book.
Yes, and that's a part, Nadia, that I loved, when we decided for that multiple description as a starter. And I love to be provoked also when I do any kind of sessions. So what is reinvention, and give me your kind of definition. And most of the times, I facilitate or host the process the way that we open up, so that everyone then actually, leaves with his or her own definition that makes sense to them in that time, in that moment, whatever is going on in their lives that reinvention is being seen for. So I think it's a very, very important part of how we're bringing it forward.
Love that. So one simple practice, whenever you are in a challenging environment, try to create a collection of definitions to work with, to give room, to give a range, to give a space, to open up. Another, of course, are being surrounded with diverse experiences, environments, systems, and people. And I do want to ask a few words about the talent cloud, because I think that's a different applied twist on thinking about diversity in a corporate setting. So can you say a few words about this project? What is Talent Cloud?
Thank you, Nadia, for asking it. And Matea, I hope you're still listening. Listening. She was she's the fire of the project, or I should say, almost a company now, because it's becoming very valid on the market. But in essence, there was a HR hackathon organized by Danfoss, where Matea is organizing those things. And the idea was to bring or to create a cloud, not a cloud of data, but the cloud of knowledge of people from different organizations, from different industries, so that it would be kind of a platform where you could say, all right, we're dealing with this challenge right now. Do I need to go and search for all possible solutions, or for some people who are already doing this? No, I can log in and see if there's knowledge in the cloud, maybe similar one or whatever, that I can kind of connect to. But from there, now, how that is really happening, there's not a lot of software included, honestly, because it is about creating a space where different companies meet and put out their current challenges, and they partner up to work on them. So you always get, at least one person consulting you, and you always are at least one consultant to another organization, person, team. So that creates, diverse teams, diverse environments, and again, see diversity in this context really is about creating an open and safe space where this exchange of information, of knowledge, is not limited by a deadline or a rule, internal rule of how things are done, or how they have been done until now. And there's this unexpectedness moment of, who am I going to end up with, why am I, as an engineer, working with an HR person right now? Oh yes, Matea, thanks for sharing the website of the project, because we really want to grow internationally next year. as much as possible, because that does add so many different perceptions, that we, get closed up in one country for sure, or with one market. So yes, that's what we're creating, and we're so happy that every year there's more and more different organizations trusting us, that they are happy with the process, and results at the end. There's the whole exchange lasts for about 3 months. So then it really depends on the complexity of the challenge, what can be done in those 3 months. But we always kind of, as bodies, as clouders, that we call ourselves, try to be there to kind of at least set up a blueprint of a kind. So, the organization, the person, the team gets out with a doable or actionable a plan. So yeah, that's Talent Cloud.
Just to highlight a few things about Talent Cloud that are unique. One, traditional hackathons happen in a very short period of time, and they are almost a fun exercise that has very little touch with reality. The fact that Talent Cloud process takes over a long period of time, multiple months, and it's embedded in the life of a real challenge, it connects back and forth between the slow thinking of imagining a solution to a challenge and the fast testing in the real world. And there's back and forth. The second thing that I love about Talent Cloud is that in most similar, I don't want to say similar, but in most processes of engaging diverse group of people to solve a challenge, there's usually a customer who asks for help and the providers who provide help. Here, the roles change very quickly. One day you are receiving consulting, another day you are giving consulting, and it is not there's never a hierarchy on who knows better in the situation. And of course, the fact that multiple companies participate, multiple organizations, I would hope there's also nonprofits, maybe public sector will start approaching you, media, that there's multiple type of organization, multiple organizations from very different industries, that automatically adds a twist and additional resources. So grab the link, Talent Cloud EU English version, and hopefully you will participate next year. Well, we are wrapping up. I just wanted to ask you for any parting questions you want to leave our audience with as they're exploring complexity and diversity in a very real world they're in and the context they're in.
I mean, a very simple, would be what diversity means to you. Just think about it. It's very hot topic right now, or it's becoming a very hot topic, kind of as part of the sustainability, let's say, movement, or changes, transformations. And I'm welcoming that, but I'm also inviting you to see and notice how you're defining it, or are you creating and excluding maybe something or someone because of it. And in terms of complexity, it's life. We can never grasp it all, but I'm definitely inviting you to explore more on warm data, because it will bring richness to your thinking, for your life and for whatever you're doing in your life.
Love those two big questions. What is diversity for me? Multiple definitions. And can I double click on the concept of warm data? What even and the warm data? Can I give myself 5 minutes to Google and look what does resonate with me? And maybe there's a practice or two I want to engage in. Love it. I see some reactions here and some thank yous. Nafis is in India. He's a certified reinvention practitioner. And Victoria is in LA and she would love to connect and learn more. Victoria, just reach out to Ina on LinkedIn. I'm sure she will follow up with you. Loved having you. Miss you. I hope we see each other soon. Appreciate your time. And for everyone who joined us today, I hope this was the kind of deep, reflective conversation we sometimes lack. Very often, our invention show are very pragmatic and tactical, but occasionally we need to pause, especially on the times like this that require us to stop and think. So, thank you so much all for joining. And make sure you grab the handbook. You have the links in the chat. You can download the preview. Make sure that you check out the Talent Cloud website. And of course, see you next week at 11 a.m. US Eastern, right here. Thank you all very, very much and have an amazing rest of the week. Thank you, Ina.
Thank you.